Recolor in Affinity. How can you change the color of anything to anything else? So maybe you want to go from color to color. Maybe you want to go from black and white to color or vice versa. We're going to look through a number of examples looking at different situations. I'll give you an idea of what method you might want to try first, but then if that's not working, what are some of the other methods you can employ? And if you're someone who likes to follow along, I'm going to include all the photos that we use in these examples so you can follow along. So if you look at the first pinned comment down below, you'll see instructions on how to grab those photos. So how do you change color in Affinity? Let's dive right in and find out. Let's start with this example and let's pretend we're trying to change the color of this car. Now I got a viewer question about this recently from Ron, so shout out to Ron if you're watching. Now Ron said both in Photoshop and Affinity he would use a method where he would add a layer above where he's trying to change the color. He would grab a paintbrush, grab a color, so maybe something like this red, and then he would paint on the car and then he's going to switch the blend mode to overlay. So watch what happens to this red when I switch this to overlay. So if I come over here and switch this to overlay, we'll see that it changes the shade of that red. Now we have more of a pink or a maroon. We are keeping some highlights and shadows, so that's good. Some good stuff is happening, but there is just a better way to do this. Now, Ron, you were on the right track because this method could work, and you also mentioned using a mask where its color spilled over where you didn't want it, and that is going to be key because we are talking about how do we select the pixels that we want to affect. And in Affinity, there are lots of different ways we can make selections. There are also lots of ways we can make adjustments or we can paint color directly like this. So we're really trying to find a combination of methods that's going to give us the quickest result and also a result, of course, that has the quality and the result that we're looking for. Now we're going to work through multiple examples because there's not one method that works in every situation. But I started with this example because I'm going to show you the one you should usually start with because it's the one that's going to work in most situations. So let's just throw out this layer here where we painted on because we're not going to need that. What we want to do, let's add an HSL adjustment layer. So I'm going to come down here. We're just going to come under here and we're going to find this HSL adjustment. And then when we come on here, what we can do is we can choose a color range that we want to shift and we can shift that to another color. So if I were to just grab this hue shift slider right now, you can see that I am changing the color of the car. And actually, because there isn't too much in the way of color in the background of this, you could almost get away with this in this photo. You could almost just drag this slider, change it to whatever you want. So if I wanted the color of the car to be some sort of red, so let's go find something there. Then you could play around and say, okay, I want it to be a little bit more saturated, but maybe it's needs to be a little darker. So you could fool around. Now, obviously, when you start playing around with things like saturation and luminosity, or if you have other colors in your scene, like here's some color where it's spilling up here, then you might want to come in here and make an additional selection to mask this out to just the area of the photo you want to affect. So that's where I could come in here and I could just grab something like my object selection tool. Let's hover over this car. Let's make sure we're on that layer so it's picking that up. Hover over the car here and it finds the car, makes a pretty good rough selection. So then I could come in here and just add a layer mask. So I'll come down here to the mask icon. And then what I want to do is I want to take this mask and I want to place it inside this HSL. So if I drag it over, it's going to do a clipping mask. See, we don't want to do that. So let's drag it to the right here. We'll see it says place inside. I release it. And now if I just hit Control D to deselect, we see I've taken that color change now, and we pretty much are just applying it to the car. Now, if there's spots on the wheel wells or other thing where it has color where you don't want to do it, of course you could come in here, you could go directly on this mask layer again. So here's our mask layer. We could paint out other things if we wanted to. However, this image that we started with here is actually a super easy image because there's really only the color on the car. There's not color in other parts of the scene. So because of that, I can come in here and we were able to just do a global adjustment where we drag this slider and we could get whatever color we wanted. And of course, the rest of the scene not really affected. We did put a mask on the car, but pretty easy. What if we had a lot more going on in our image? So let me switch over and look at this colored pencil example. So let's take this example here. Maybe I want to change just this blue pencil here. Maybe I want to make it pink or something. So I could do the same thing where I come up here and I add a hue saturation luminance adjustment layer here. And then with this, you can come in here and you can target specific colors. So you can click on any one of these colors to target that color. So if I clicked on the red and I made adjustments, then I dragged hue, then I'm just targeting anything in that red range. Let me just reset that by hitting the reset button up here. So I'll reset that. But an even better way to do it is if I come up here, let me just get rid of this for a second. Let me just delete this. Let me just add it one more time. And we add this adjustment layer, hue, saturation, luminance. If you click on any of these, you'll notice right here, there's this hidden grayed out picker option. But if I click on any color, it doesn't matter what color. It doesn't have to be the color I'm going to use. I'm going to target this blue, but I can click on red as my starting point. All I want to do is click on one of these so that this picker then becomes an option. Then now I can click on the picker, and now I can specifically click anywhere in my image and tell it what color I am targeting. So if I click on this blue, we'll see here, it finds the blue range of colors here. So it's trying to use these 4 dots here to tell me the color range. Now we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but now we'll see if I just adjust this slider here, we'll see we're just targeting things in that blue range. So there, maybe I want to shift them to pink so we can move it over there and do something, make some sort of shift like that. However, it's targeting more colors than I want. So now is the case where we have multiple ways we could handle this. The first way we could try to do that is by narrowing our range. So if you look at this color wheel here, it's showing you with this inner circle sort of the range of values you have selected. And then with the outer circle, as we drag the hue slider, we'll see how this shifts. So the outer color is just showing you what color is getting mapped to that new color. So if I drag it way over here into something like this range here, we'll see this shows up at pink. And so we see this blue range is now being mapped to this pink range. Now there are 4 sliders here. And with these sliders, you can come out here, and the outer sliders you can use to narrow the range. So if I start to drag these sliders in, we'll see how a narrow and more narrow band of color gets affected. Now, you also have inner sliders. The inner sliders affect how much of a feather there is. If you have the outer slider and the inner slider close together, you're going to get this drastic sort of shift of color where there's going to be a lot of contrast. The more these are separated, the more sort of a feather, the more you get a smooth color transition. So you can come in here and you can try to fool around, and you can try to sometimes finesse this to get the exact color you want. But what I'll say about this is it's hard to really get in there and see a big version of this and make the sort of minute changes that you sometimes need to make. So I think a lot of times it's better to just use the color picker, select what you want. It might do a wider range. Let me just reset it here. Let me just do the picker again. Let's pick this one here. Let's make the shift. So I'm watching this blue pencil here, trying to get it to the color I want. So let's go and say, okay, I want this pink color that's showing up right now. Maybe I want to take the saturation down just ever so slightly. So make the adjustments you need to make. And then what are your other methods for selecting just that? Because obviously it got more pencils than I wanted to. If I try to finesse this slider, it's not really working for me. So an easier way to do this would be just like, I know I can just take a rectangle selection and really just come in here and just isolate this pencil very easily. So you got to think about what other selection tools you have, because it's about making that initial shift with the hue saturation. It's letting us target a color range. But then if you need to narrow that farther, that's when you can start to come in and add a mask, so you can even farther define what area of your photo is actually being affected by that shift. So making the hue saturation luminance shift, but then also I can add a mask here. Once again, I'll make sure that mask gets placed inside of that. And so now if I hit deselect, we can see that now really I've made it so I'm just affecting this color here, and I'm changing the blue pencil to a pink pencil. So that's really what it's about. It's about how do you combine these different tools to select precisely what you want to select. And then of course, what other adjustments and things do we have in here? We have hue saturation, luminance as a way we can shift to different values, but there are other adjustment layers in here that we're going to talk about a little bit as well. So hue saturation, luminance, this one is the one I think most often is a good starting point, and a lot of times it'll get you all the way there. So here's another example. Let's say we want to change the color of this jacket. You can probably already tell, because the jacket is very similar in tone to our skin tones and also to the background here, we're not going to be able to just add an HSL layer. We're going to have to make a farther selection of this jacket, because if I come in here now and we just try that HSL selection, even if we were to come choose color picker and select that color, we're still going to get a range of colors that's going to include pretty much everything in the scene. So that's just not going to work by itself. So let's throw that out. And we could either make a selection before or after, but let's go ahead and try to make a selection of this jacket first up front. So I'll just come up here and grab the object selection tool. We're going to hover over the jacket. Now sometimes when you're using the object selection tool like this, if you want to get it to sort of choose a sub object or give you more choices, if you just hold down the Alt or Option key, suddenly it's going to give you something different. So when I'm just hovering it over here without holding down that Alt or Option, it pretty much is just finding her. But if I start to hold down Alt on my Windows, that would be Option on a Mac, then suddenly I get sort of a selection of this jacket. Now, I can refine this farther because I can see things like the buttons I'm not going to want to have affected, and it's missing some areas here. So I can come in here and continue to refine this farther. Pretty much anytime you're using any of the selection tools here inside of Affinity, up in your contextual bar, you're going to have these different modes where you can either start a new selection, you can add to the existing selection, which is what we're doing now, or you can subtract or find the intersect. So if I go to subtract now, and now I just come down here and we hover, again still with the object selection tool, hover over these buttons, then suddenly I can start and take them and remove them from the selection. Now when using this object selection tool, you sort of get this hatch line overlay, which is helpful, showing you what you're going to select, but it then becomes distracting at a point. So if you just move your cursor outside the work area, then that goes away. Of course, a way to see even better what you have selected is entering quick mask mode. And you can do that by tapping Q on your keyboard. So when you tap Q, it's going to by default put this red overlay on screen. So anything where we're not seeing that red overlay, that is what's selected. The red overlay are areas that are not selected. And you can have in between areas where there's partial red, and those are partially selected areas. So now I can really come in here and zoom in on this and start to see the areas where things are selected, where things are not selected. And then right here, I can see a little bit of an area I want to add in. And so that's when maybe you can come in with one of your other selection tools, or you can sort of start to paint right here on your mask. So when you're in quick mask mode like this, you can paint with white or black. So if you hit D on your keyboard, then suddenly if I were to come in here and start painting on screen, let me just hit B to get to my brush tool. So let me switch to white here, and I'm going to do that by hitting X on my keyboard to flip my foreground and background colors. And then to see if I paint with white here, that's another area that's being added to my selection. So suddenly I'm seeing that here. Anything with red is going to be hidden. So if I switch back with using my X to get back to black, and I paint with black, see, I can paint away those areas. This is one of those things where if you start doing really refined selections, you may want a Wacom tablet. Now I talk about that in my paintbrush tool tutorial, so I can link that up above. And also I have an Amazon affiliate store where I link to some Wacom tablets, and they're even really cheap ones you can get for under $50. So I'll have a link to something like that down in the comments. Now that's something where I can earn an affiliate commission, but you can check that out if you like. So I'm going to come in here with my paintbrush tool, and I'm just going to sort of start to paint in areas that I want to bring back or paint away areas I don't want. So I'll just tap X on my keyboard, and then I just come in here and start to refine this selection even more. Now you can use automated tools, so if it's something like where you can use the flood fill tool or one of these other tools, you can go ahead and do that. So whatever you think is going to work fastest. Now, the one thing I'll say is how precise you need to be here with this selection you're making. That really comes down to, how is this going to be viewed? Are people going to be viewing this up close? Is it going to be sort of a smaller image that's not as high in resolution? So it really comes down to the particular project and how precise you need to be in terms of making your mask here. Now, also of note here, if you have something that has a soft edge, then this could be a situation where you want to paint in a gray value, because if you paint in a gray value, then you're going to be having something that's partially selected. So anything black, not selected at all, white, totally selected. If I go to a middle gray here, that would sort of be 50% selected. So I could choose that middle gray, and then I could come paint at the edge here if I wanted like a slightly softer edge. So these are all decisions you can make as you go through here and refine the selection. So I see that I definitely missed something in here. So I could come in here and I'm going to add a little X to switch my foreground and background, and I could just paint this out, adjusting my brush size on the fly as needed. Just make this so this is a little bit better in terms of getting the sort of V here that is in her clothing. Now again, I'll just zoom back out. You can get as precise as you want to be. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this right now because I don't need to get this super precise for this example, but I'll come in here and I'll make a few more quick adjustments. Okay, I've decided that's good enough for now. I can always come back later and make more refinements. But anytime you're in quick mask mode like this and you want to just get back to seeing that marching ant selection, just tap Q again and then you're out of quick mask mode. Then you're seeing the selection as this marching ants display on screen. And so now I could go ahead and apply my adjustment here, and it's going to apply the adjustment layer with this selection as a mask. So I'll come in here under adjustments, and we're going to again grab that hue, saturation, luminance adjustment layer, and we'll come in here and we have the selection active. So now I'm going to come in here and apply some sort of hue shift, and we're just going to be affecting those areas. So I'll go ahead and hit X now. I can hit Control D to deselect, and we can see we do have a mask here, but let me just go off on a really quick side tangent because I actually did something I prefer not to do. And maybe this side tangent will save you a bit of a headache, because this mask is a little different than what you've seen me apply so far in this lesson. Anytime you have a live selection like I did when I added the adjustment layer, then it embeds that mask. It sort of becomes more of a locked relationship. There is no easy way for me to separate this mask from this adjustment layer. If I would have instead, let me just turn that off, first have created my adjustment layer. So let me just do hue, saturation, luminance. We'll drag it to whatever. We'll find some sort of tone like this. We can adjust this later, but I'm just doing some initial tone. And then if I had a selection, so I can load this selection by control clicking on the mask there. And then I come up here and then I add a mask anywhere. So I'm going to add a mask that's going to put it up here. What you've seen me do previously is take this mask and drag it where I see this place inside and then release it. I'll hit Control D to deselect. So yes, functionally at the moment, this new one we created and this other method we use, they're doing the same thing. However, with this top version where I've embedded it inside, it lives on its own layer in here, so it's just easy to separate that. If I decide to, it gives me a lot more flexibility. For example, let's say I want to also add in a curves adjustment layer to maybe affect the exact same area, just her coat, not the background, not her face, not her skin tones. So I could come up here and I could add an adjustment layer. Let's choose curves, so we'll grab curves here. I'll just go ahead and drag it up and down in a minute. We can still adjust that later, just do something initially. And now if I were to take this curves adjustment and this hue saturation adjustment that has the mask on its own layer here, I could take both of these here. Let me just control click to grab them both, select them both. I'll come down here, I'll put these both in a group, so I'll just add a group. Now they're in the group here. My curves adjustment is currently affecting everything, but if I were to just come down here and take this mask and drag it up to the top of the group, then suddenly now both the curves adjustment layer and the hue saturation adjustment layer are being masked to just the area I want. So this is just a case of doing it where you place a mask inside versus the other method. They just give you slightly different results, and I prefer the one that gives me more flexibility. I always like to do non-destructive editing. I always like to have as much flexibility as possible. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can make a live selection and then have an embedded mask like this. It just doesn't give you quite as much flexible freedom. Now, what if you wanted to take an image like this where there's color, and let's say you wanted to make her coat either black or white? Well, I could do the same thing. I could still use the hue, saturation, luminance adjustment layer. So I'll go ahead and add that again. I'm going to add it first, and then we'll come in here. But before I make the adjustments here, I mentioned before having more flexibility when you have the mask like this. When you have a mask on its own layer like this, I can just hold down Alt, grab that, drag it up here, place inside, and I've basically taken a copy of this mask and I've placed it on this layer. So now I already have that selection made because we made that in that prior example. So just another example of how you have more flexibility when you have the mask on a separate layer like this. So I'll come in now with this adjustment layer here. We'll click on it to get back in. And then here you can come in here, and of course something that is black or white, you've taken the saturation. If we look at our curve here, anytime we come down towards this gray here, towards black, towards white, we're taking the color information out of it. So you can just grab and take the saturation totally out of something. And then if you want to make it black or white, you're going to come down here and use this luminosity. We can shift it so we get more of a white coat here, find the right range, or we can go the other way if we wanted this to be a black coat. So again, come down here and adjust this. And then of course you can still look at your mask. I can see part of her sleeve here that I've missed. So I could come in here and refine my mask as needed. But using this luminosity shift, now that we have that option and we've taken the saturation out of that, you can very easily take a colored subject and move something to black and white. Now, what about the opposite? What if you have something that's black or white and you want to add color information? So let's look at this example here. This gentleman has a white shirt. Let's say we want to move that to any color value. Well, I'm not going to be able to use a hue, saturation, luminance adjustment layer because that shifts color that already exists in the scene. So if I come in here and I just add that layer here, and I come in here and I start to mess with this hue slider, we're not really doing anything because there's not any color information in the shirt to work with. It is already desaturated. It's a white shirt. So let's close this out and I'll go ahead and throw out that adjustment layer. Now this is where at the top of the video we talked about the method Ron was using where he was trying to paint color and then use a blending mode. That's exactly what we're going to do in this instance. So before we do that, let me just show you that I already have a mask here of the shirt. So I could turn this on here and we see I just have the shirt selected. I could also just alt click if we wanted to see the mask itself. So if I alt click right on this layer, I have to have it turned on. So if I alt click on the layer, we can see there's the mask and then click on the background. We could also come in here and we could control click to load that. So lots of things we could do. We have the mask now of the shirt. I created that using all the methods we talked about in those prior examples. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start by dragging out a rectangle. Right now I'm under my own studio here, but if you were under the Vector Studio or under the Pixel Studio, you just need to look and find this rectangle tool. Now we're going to go ahead and drag out a rectangle, and it can be as large as you want. You just have to make sure that it at least covers the entire area of his shirt where you want to change the color. So I'm going to do something like that. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this mask layer that I already have. And so again, using all the methods we talked about before I created that mask, and again, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to place this inside. I don't have it turned on yet, so let me make sure I go turn it on, and then we have it. So we're just masking that rectangle to his shirt. Now for the final trick here, we're going to come in here and we're going to change this blend mode to multiply. The reason why this multiply mode works is because this multiply compares this new layer we've added with the layer below, and it uses those grayscale values to decide how much it's going to darken the existing layers. So when there's white completely below, then the color on top is going to show purely through 100% as that color, and if there was black, then the black would show through. But for all those other shades of gray, it is darkening down this initial color on top. So the multiply mode is going to darken whatever's on the layer, but it's going to do so depending on the values of that color layer below. And so that's why it's working here. That green rectangle was all one color, but now it's being affected by all those tones below in this white shirt where we have all these different tonal values. And so this multiply mode is giving us the result we want. And now just with this color slider here, I can come up here and I can change this shirt to any color I want. And of course, on the same thing here, I can come in here and play with the saturation if I want. I can take things and make them desaturated. I can bring them up. I can make things brighter. I can make things darker. So we're controlling it all now very easily just on this one color wheel up here. And of course, it's only affecting our shirt because of the mask we've applied to this layer. Now, if I instead wanted to make this shirt black, I could just take this slider up here, bring it all the way down to desaturated, and then push it to black up here. Now, you probably don't want to go completely black because it's probably not all 100% black, but you could drag it out a little bit, something like this, so it started to look good. Now, I don't want you to think there's only one way to do this. Let me just tweak this slightly, but there are other ways you could do this. So I'm going to turn that off. We also could have done this easily with a curves adjustment layer. So I'll just come under my adjustment layers, this time select curves, and then here's my curves adjustment. Let me once again bring this mask on it so we're just affecting the shirt. So I'm going to alt click and drag on the mask and bring a copy and place inside. And so now in this curves adjustment, let's make sure I have it selected. What you're seeing here is the histogram with sort of the darks on this side, the midtones, and then all your lightest values are going to be here on the right side of the curve. So if I take this here, I can suddenly change the white point and make it so I make everything in the image darker, 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 darker. So basically now I'm doing the same sort of thing I did with this tool here. It's just a different way to do it. And the reason why I'm showing you this, even though they're doing essentially the same thing, I just want to show you they're often different methods here in Affinity. So you just got to fool around, get comfortable with the different tools, the different options. Sometimes you're going to find one has advantages and works better. Other times maybe they work the same, but you just prefer and work better with one. It might just be more intuitive to you. So again, fool around, get to know these different tools, and you'll have lots of options when it comes to this sort of task. Let's look at the next example. So let's say we want to change this black shirt to color. Again, we don't have any color information to start with, so we can't just use that HSL slider, but we could do something similar to what we did last time. Now, so I'm going to start by adding a curves adjustment layer here. So I'm going to come under here and I'm going to add curves. So we'll find curves, and I have a mask that I already pre-made here. That's basically that shirt. So I'm going to grab that mask here and we'll put that inside. And so now when I do that curves adjustment, I'm just adjusting that shirt because I've selected for that with my mask. So what I'll do is I'll grab this black point because these are my whites, these are my blacks. If I brought my black point all the way up, I could make everything all white. Now I forgot to turn my mask on, so let's make sure I turn it on. So I could go to all white with the shirt. Of course, we don't want to do that. We want to bring the black point down so that we have some set shadows in the shirt. So I'm just going in here. I'm trying to find the right mix here. I could also bring this white point over a little bit so I could play around a little bit, brighten up this a little bit. So just fooling around here to what looks like a good starting point. So maybe something like that. And then once I do that, then we could do the same sort of thing we did last time where we did that rectangle option. So if I went in here now and I grabbed the rectangle and we drag this over top, then once again, we could take that and grab a mask here and just use that Alt command to drag this over, place it inside, and now we have the shirt. And then of course, remember we used the multiply mode. So I'm gonna come down here and find that multiply option again. And again, make sure I have my mask turned on because I keep forgetting to do that. So there we are, we have this. So I accidentally put my mask in multiply mode. Did not mean to do that. You got to watch out for this. I wanted to put the rectangle in multiply mode. So there we go. Now we have it. Now if I look at this now, I can say, okay, my shadows aren't really coming in dark enough. So maybe I have to go back to that curves layer that I made before, and we want to pull this point down until we find something that's looking good. We could adjust all this down a little bit. So it is really just about tweaking this until you find something that looks good, that looks natural. So that's one way to do it, sort of using those methods we used for the last example. Of course, there are even more options in here. So let me just show you another option. Let me just turn these off for now. I can also just come down here and use a recolor adjustment. So recolor is different from hue, saturation, luminance. Hue, saturation, luminance uses color values that already exist and just shift them around. With the recolor, it's actually remapping colors. So we could come in here with this one. Once again, let me add a mask to this. So I'll grab this mask layer. We're going to bring that down on recolor. Make sure it's turned on this time. Now I could come in here and just play around with this hue slider. Again, let's say we were... again, make sure I'm on the right layer. I keep forgetting that. Come in here and drag this around. So again, look for something in that blue range until we find something natural. Fool around here as much as you need with this saturation slider, with this lightness slider. So again, just a different way to attempt things. I just want to go over a couple different options here because I want you to know it's not always one thing. Hue, saturation, and luminance, that HSL adjustment is usually a good place to start if you're working with color, but it's not an option if you're working with black and white. You have to start somewhere different. So I'm just trying to give you some of those different options. Now, I'm going to do one last example here because I want you to see that at hue, saturation, and luminance, that's not always going to work. Sometimes that will break down even when working with an image where you have color to start with. Let's pretend we're trying to recolor part of this hot air balloon. So let me just zoom in a little closer here. I'll grab my zoom tool. Let's just get in here a little closer. Now, we have this sort of dark blue row here. Let's pretend I wanted to change that to match it to the yellow color above. And I do have a mask here, which I've set up already. So this right here, I've sort of masked out that blue layer, so I'll be able to select just that layer. So let's start by using that hue, saturation, luminance. Remember, I said that's the one often you should try first. So we'll come up here and we'll grab this HSL layer and we'll do an adjustment layer. And then let's apply the mask to it. So I'm going to grab this mask here. We're going to place it inside. Make sure I turn that mask on. And then as I come in here and I start to make adjustments, I can drag this and I can sort of visually watch and try to get something in that same yellow tone. So we'll see. I can't quite find my way there. Let's see. This is more in that yellow, so then I could start to boost the saturation. I could start to boost the luminance, and so we're getting into that yellow tone. But look what's happening here. So let me just dial this up a little bit. Now I understand I don't have it exactly matching those tones, but we're trying to get in that yellow range. I'm not quite there, so I could fool around up here. But then also just I want you to see what's happening here as we zoom in. It's starting to break down. We're seeing more and more of this pixelation, more and more of this banding, these artifacts, and this is the sort of thing that can happen when you try to drastically shift colors. Now, in relation to this, one thing I'll mention quickly just as an aside, if I look up here, I can see up here that I'm working in sRGB color space, and this 8 here lets me know I'm in 8-bit color depth. Now, what does that mean? If I go to my histogram here, and we think of this slider where everything on the right represents the bright values, so pure white, and now everything over here we're getting to the darkest value, so we get all the way to pure black. There are in an 8-bit depth file, basically 256 levels here. So if you think of like a set of stairs going from black to white, there would be 256 steps. Now, if we were to go to a 16-bit file, then there are actually over 65,000 steps. So when you work in 8-bit depth, basically you're working on a file size that's smaller, but there's less information there. There are less colors to work with, there are less steps, so you're more likely to get this type of banding. If I were to go on my computer now and file open, I'm just going to open something here that I know is a raw file. So if you open a raw file in Affinity, it's going to come in develop module, this develop persona by default. And so if I hit develop here and I come in here now, I can see I am in 16-bit depth mode. So there's more information to work with. When you shoot with a DSLR SLR camera, or more iPhones might be able to do this, you shoot a raw file, so it saves more information. It hasn't compressed it yet to a JPEG format. When you save the JPEG or PNG, what you're doing essentially is you're throwing out some information. So the only reason I'm mentioning all this, we won't go totally down the rabbit hole, but it's just to let you know, if you're doing any sort of professional level retouching and you really want the most control possible, work at the highest bit depth possible. Don't flatten your file, don't throw away information until you're sure you've made all the edits you want to edit. But a lot of times that's not going to be possible. So if you're working with something like this and you try to do one color shift like this HSL slider here, it's not working. You may have to come up with alternate methods. So let me show you another method here. So let's not do this HSL. Instead, I'm going to come down here, and this time let's choose gradient map. So we're going to choose this gradient map option. Now it looks really funky, you get these crazy colors, but what it's doing is you get to tell it what color to map to your highlights, what color to map to your midtones, and then what color you want to map to your shadows, your dark areas. So I can start to remap these colors, but first let me go ahead and drag this mask up because I don't need it down here, but I do want it on the gradient map layer. So now I can just affect this one row, and I also can see the row above where I want to sample these colors from. So this is my shadow area here. So if I click this color, and then if I click on this color and just grab this picker here and sort of left click and hold, and I'm going to go out and sample one of the shadow areas. So maybe like right there, sample that color. Then I'm going to grab here something in the midtone. So I'll click this, bring up that color swatch. Again, click and hold, go out and grab something that's maybe a little bit more in the middle range. And then finally come up here and click this. This is going to be my highlights. So we'll grab this and we'll try to sample something that's like a brighter yellow. So something like that. So you see how very quickly we were able to get that and get that much more in the range we are looking for. Now there still are some things I might want to fix if I was using like a zoomed in part of this image, because I missed part of my selection here. This seam needs to be a little darker. But what we were able to do is we were able to map those colors using this gradient map and not have the colors break down in the same way they did when we used this hue saturation adjustment. So we can see how this one really breaks down. You have all this banding, all those artifacts. We did not get that with this gradient map. We had a much cleaner result. So again, the takeaway is just that there are different ways you can come in and adjust a color in Affinity. So HSL might be a good starting point for a lot of times when you have color to work with, but other times you do have other options that you can choose from. Hey, thanks for watching. Feel free to hit the like and subscribe button if you found this helpful. You can even hit that bell icon if you want to get notifications anytime I come out with a new video. Thanks again for stopping by, and I hope to see you soon.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that. Spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas. Think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.